Yeah, well, you're such a hero of mine. I mean, like you made that movie. For people who don't know, you made Blackfish, which was a successful movie. But beyond that, I feel like what's so cool is like you raised awareness about this issue and you literally changed the world. Like SeaWorld no longer is going to breed killer whales in captivity due to basically your film, right?
Thank you so much for that. I mean, yeah, I guess, sorry, that's gonna not be good. Sorry. Yes, in answer to that question, yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that's true. I always say that there were so many people who were working on this issue before Blackfish that, I met as a result of making this film, and I tapped into just this well of information from marine biologists, from advocates, from the former SeaWorld trainers. And so I just had so much information to be able to come into it. So I feel like all of us together were able to do something, just like shine a light on something that I think was pretty inhumane and people responded to.
Yeah, there's something about whenever I see animals
Yeah.
or kids being hurt. Something. I mean, I love horror movies, which is that. So that's I don't know. There's something weird there because I can watch horror movies. I can watch people getting chopped up in pieces. If I know it's a movie and it's a horror, it's adults, it's fine. But if it's kids or animals, I have a really hard time with it.
I know. I understand. I'm the same. I'm the same way. I can't do films or and even read scripts the moment I see something like that. I have to stop reading. So I'm the same, but I do love contained horror. I'm a big horror fan. Like, I like that genre or whatever, but there's a line, I feel.
Yeah. I think it's so cool what you're doing with your films. And because in my opinion, like that's my goal, whether it's with this podcast or if I might want to someday make a documentary or something, because I want to change the world. I want to do something positive. Like, do you feel like that is your goal with filmmaking? Because you could probably get a job in doing a big Marvel box office bomb, huge hit and make tons of money. But that's kind of like a different feeling than like doing something where you actually do a positive impact. Not saying that the Marvel movies don't make a positive impact in some way too, but it's a different thing, right?
I guess it's different, right? Like I think, I don't ever come in to it thinking, oh, I'm going to for sure change somebody's mind or change the world. You do want to make somebody feel something, right? Like that, like I want to, whatever it is, like make you um laugh, cry, all those, the whole spectrum of emotions. But I think specifically with the documentaries, I think because I saw it work in Blackfish, I do think there's a little more of a feeling of a mission or a feeling of like, gosh, what if I could do this with a bunch of different things? What if I was able to, tell a story faithfully? Um, would that be able to move the needle on other subjects that are important? So there is a little bit of that obligation or something kind of being held over my head a little bit with that. But I also know that it doesn't work sometimes when you try to. Do you know what I mean?
Really?
Oh my gosh, it so doesn't work. Like nobody wants to be preached to. Nobody,
Uh,
you don't want to come into a movie thinking someone has already taken a side, and they're just like purporting to give all this information, but it's actually they've already made their own conclusion. Those don't typically work, I think. But maybe they do. Maybe, like I'm sure, an inconvenient truth or something like that, where facts were just kind of like divulged. And of course he had a reason. He knew what the answer was, the conclusion. But so that was probably an example of something that did work. But I, for me, I think like sometimes my experience has been people don't want it like a 1-800 number at the end of your film.
hmm.
They want to be told a good story. So like you have to stay truthful to telling a really good story. And then you may have a chance, right, of having people be moved to do something.
Do you think it involves like evoking some sort of emotion? Like obviously with Blackfish, like people are going to feel for those orcas and the killer. They're just such beautiful animals, like unless you just don't have a soul or something. But like, I mean,
Right.
like whether it be with that kind of emotion or like, even like, I feel like laughter can really change people's state too.
Definitely, I think it is emotion. I also think that people have to like see themselves in your movie. Like somehow like just be sort of like in that, see a version of themselves in there. So like if you're a parent maybe or something, I think I found that people resonated with the calf, separating calves from the moms, you know? Um,
Right. That part, oh, that got me. Yeah.
it's just painful, right? It's just,
Yeah.
and I don't think you have to be a parent to feel that way, right? I think you're just like, whatever, you know,
And it's
what
one of
this
those
is
things
like.
like you don't think about if you go to SeaWorld, you're just like, oh, that's cool. They have a killer. You don't think like, how did they get these killer whales? Like,
I know. I didn't think that way. I didn't think, I didn't know any of it, right? I didn't know any of it. I was a mom who took her kids to SeaWorld, you know, like I just sort of was, but I was a documentary filmmaker. And I remember just Don Brancho, the story of this amazing trainer who was at the top of her game being killed. And reading about that, I
is
kept
that
wondering,
what got your interest in it?
yeah, I read about it and I couldn't understand why there wasn't more like covered, you know, more coverage of like, well, but why did he? And then there was an article by in Outside Magazine by Tim Zimmerman, who is a writer, and he wrote this huge article, and he kind of like started looking behind the curtain a little bit and talking to former SeaWorld trainers. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is someone's at least saying something. It wasn't her ponytail. It wasn't the fact that she had a ponytail that the orca wanted to play with, which was, I think, right at that point, that was kind of the statement that was being purported by SeaWorld. So then I was like, okay, well, there's more to the story. So I just started uncovering it, started talking to people from the inside. And then the more you talk to people on the inside, the more they give you a friend of theirs to talk to. So it was literally kind of peeling back the onion. And I was like, I thought I was going to make a movie about trainers, basically. Like it was going to be about like, why are we getting in the water with apex predators? This is dangerous. Like, what's this whole world of you know, orca training? And then I was like, wait, you're telling me the orcas are just like miserable, like, you know, like this is wrong in every way that something can be wrong. Um, and so it just kind of like I wandered into this crazy forest, just like the audience did when they watched it.
Yeah. So I know you talk about this with your new film, The Grab, as well, in terms of like lawsuits. Like, were you worried about SeaWorld suing you or like the legal things with that? Because I mean, you're
Yeah,
using footage and all that.
totally worried about that always. Always, you know, like you have to just say super disciplined, right? Like very judicious about what you use, how you use it. Are you being fair? Are you staying true to the facts? Are you are you implying something that's not true? You know, um, and and if so, is that, you know, are you implying something that's not actually not happening? And you want to make sure you're not doing that, you know? So so
Do you
yeah,
have like a lawyer that looks over things at the end and say, "Oh, you got to take this part out" or anything like that? Or
for sure.
oh, okay.
For sure. Yeah, with the grab, especially, I mean, it's Center for Investigative Reporting. So they've got their own sort of legal team. They have fact checkers, check the fact checkers, you know. It's so airtight when it comes out of that place. With Blackfish, we were on our own at first. Like we were just, okay, I'm just gonna make sure I like, you know, quadruple check every fact. And that was done. And then we brought a legal team on. But, you know, for a second there, it was just us, you know,
Hmm.
didn't have, you know, a company and money to have like lawyers like throughout the whole process. So they went through with a fine tooth comb at the end of it and just like triple checked everything. So,
So like, yeah, because how do you get that? Like, there's that footage of them. Wasn't there footage of them capturing the killer whales when they were babies?
yeah.
How did
So
they? Who had that footage, and like, why did they keep it? Maybe it was explained.
yeah.
It's been so long since I've seen it, though.
Yeah, you know, nobody knows like who was filming that footage. It's like nobody really understands like who owns it. There was
Mm.
like a guy who purported to own it because he had a copy of it. So he was like, no, this
Mm.
is mine, you know? And so like there are people who claim that like own things and own footage, especially when it's historical. But we couldn't find out like find the first people who filmed it or someone who like could actually kind of claim like this is owned by me. So some of it's fair use. It falls into fair use,
Mm.
which is like, okay, if you're using it fairly, if there's nothing else that you could possibly use that could like depict this thing, and you're doing it to try to tell the truth, about some historical fact, then oftentimes you can use it, but it's dodgy. You're still in, always afraid of being sued, of course.
Yeah, that's a scary thing for sure. What did you think of the films? Like, have you seen Food Incorporated 1 and 2? Because I feel like those two films, they kind of bridge the gap between Blackfish and your latest, The Grab. It's kind of that like animal treatment and food and how our food's being made. What did you
Yeah.
think? Have you seen those?
I have not seen them, and it's just so crazy because no, I haven't seen Food Inc. I haven't seen Food Inc. 2, and it's crazy because I like have such respect for like the filmmakers and what they were doing, and I know pretty much I think what the gist is of both of them, but I think they kind of like really the first one that they did, I think that was some of the really groundbreaking, for how you look at food and how you look at the production and all that. So and there's another one out too, but I have not seen them, and I just kick myself because I really think, I mean, it's so clear that they're my people,
Oh
So
yeah. No, it's really eye-opening, I think, because I just think a lot of people don't know how our food is being made, and it's really sad. I mean, the thing is like I don't know if you consider me a hypocrite because I eat meat, and but I'm not a carnivore. I'm an omnivore. I eat meat and vegetables and fruit, but
yeah,
I don't want to eat meat that's been, where they stack these chickens on top of each other. And I mean, just you look at the footage from the Food Inc. and you're just, I mean, it's similar to the Blackfish. You're just like, this is not right. Like, this is not how animals should be raised.
yeah,
It's for consumption.
that's right. That's right. It's and interestingly, it's just it's really tough to tell people how to eat. It's one thing to tell people like don't go to SeaWorld because there's like you can like to
Right.
not go to SeaWorld and you're doing something good in the world. But with like, okay, this is what I want, what you should imbibe and what you shouldn't, like it's just so incredibly personal. So you have to like, it's just a fine line. But we do say that like, in the grab, basically, when you think about the water, right? So it's about powerful entities grabbing up the food and water that's left on the planet out from underneath us. Well, you think like, okay, what are the things that could happen differently? Well, the grabbers can stop grabbing. The powerful can see that this is actually like an insidious, inhumane thing that's happening, and they need to stop doing that. But there's also so like, what do you and I do? And what like the main thing, like where we can move the needle the most is like 70%, 80% of the fresh water that humans use is used for food production. And within food production, the biggest user of water, right, is meat. So like the most that we could possibly move the needle on this issue is if we eat less. So like it's just a fact, right? It's just like exactly what needs to happen. And the problem with the grab, right? The reason why water is becoming sort of more scarce and more of a commodity that geopolitically is getting us in trouble across the world is because like as the population grows on the planet, there are entire countries who are like moving into the middle class and they want to eat like Americans eat, like the West has been eating, which is like meat every day, 7 days a week. Like we just think we could do that. And so like we've been doing it, and suddenly the rest of the world's going to try to do that now. And so that's what's getting us into trouble. So that's actually the way we could change this entire kind of landscape the most is by doing less. And so trying to get that out there obviously is again, it's tricky because I didn't come into it knowing that either. I was coming into it making a geopolitical thriller.
Yeah, because you started out with the fact that I think was one of the first things that you learned was that 1 out of every 4 pigs is owned by this Chinese company. Well, it was an American company, Smithfield Foods, but they were bought by the Chinese. Is that what happened?
Correct. So they were bought by a Chinese company that Nate Halverson, the key investigative reporter in
Right.
the lab, uncovered that it was actually state run. So like, it was China issuing this kind of decree of like, we need what, we're not going to have water to be able to feed our population. So we're going to need to go grab it from different
And
countries.
they're the way that, I mean, because it's obviously different in China. It's a communist party, so the business is very closely tied to the government, where have the business and they'll let them do what they want to do, but they have a certain goal they have to meet that the government makes sure that they meet. Is that, I think that's how I heard you explain it.
That's kind of my understanding. And Nate's, better at really unpacking exactly how it works, because it is a little bit like, really just like for however long Nate was kind of chasing down this story, Smithfield was still saying it was like a Chinese company, and Nate had to provide the documentation that said like, okay, no, but this is what the state is asking the Chinese company to do, and so it's sort of like, yes, is there some movement that these companies have, on their own? Like probably, it's capitalism, right? But is there, like I said, like a major directive coming from the state saying that like this is part of your goal, this is part of something and your duty and your obligation as a company in this state to make sure that we're fed.
Isn't part of it too with China? I know they're buying up a lot of the real estate, especially like in California, because their money is safer here than in China with the Communist Party. They could just say, "Oh, we don't like what you posted a meme. We don't like it. We're taking your assets." Well, they can seize their assets in China, so it's safer. And also, I think they have limits or something of how much they can own. So they come over here and they invest in. They don't care if the building's falling apart. It's still a piece of land that they can invest in here. They can't do it in China, right?
I think that, I mean, it's probably the intricacies of how that government is working and what they're doing with their businesses that I'm not sure, but I don't know enough, I think, to be able to say, but it does seem like it. It does seem like we have this sort of like almost an unregulated, to a large extent, market in this one county, let's say, like this one area, right? Because like we are a federalist country, states, in terms of water, like it's not a nationally run, there's a Department of Energy, there's no Department of Water. So it's like it's down to the states, right? It's down to states, it's down to counties. And so like in some of these cases, like the Chinese government is actually making a deal essentially, the way I understand it, with a county supervisor, in like
So
a
weird.
place that just doesn't maybe have the hardcore regulations. And so China's like, aha, here we can do business. People want to make money. Wall Street will be the broker. Like we can go in here and just kind of take advantage of their lack of hardcore laws.
Yeah, it is interesting. And like, I think one of the examples in the film that I was aware of, because I'm in Arizona, I live in Arizona, and I remember hearing
Wow.
about the story with the
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia people were like using our water. And I was like, wait, what? Like, we have water that we can outsource? That doesn't make sense to me. And then, you go more in depth in it in the film and how it affected the community around the aquifer and how these farmers were like, their land was drying up. It was really
Right.
sad.
Right. No, it is super shocking. And it was like, and it's just this hard, see, that's another kind of like just like threading the needle where like how do we, so many folks in this country are so proud of like the fact that we don't have this like behemoth national way of looking at water, and a national policy about, of water. And so like, not having a national water policy is one thing, but like then it becomes, untenable, right? When you have so many places able to just do a deal, right? And like maybe not necessarily know all the information about how much they're able to protect in their aquifer, how much they have to give, like what's the strategy, when we start running low, like is there really just that oversight, so I think in this particular case there just wasn't, and kind of it ran rampant. And it was like, this one woman in our film, Molly John, who was at the DARPA for a while, she's been at Pentagon, she's incredible, and she comes from like agriculture, studies. And she was just like, okay, there's doctrine for things like like water being a national security issue, like water and food are national security issues usually when you're at war, right? There's doctrine for like, let's protect this, make sure we're all fed, make sure adversarial country doesn't poison our food, so there's doctrine when you're at war. When you're not at war and you're at peace, you do business. And so water right now, because we're at peace, is just purely business. And so it's scary how much people can take advantage of that.
Yeah, and there's no I don't think you really went into the history. Like, is there a history of this? Is this a new, seems like a newer phenomenon, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it has been probably a bigger phenomenon now, because of just really the scarcity and the idea that, like, China and Russia are actually kind of playing the long game, right? They're seeing what, Saudi Arabia is playing the long game, right? They're seeing rising, like, populations. They're seeing, if people want to argue with whether climate change exists or whether it doesn't exist, well, if you think it doesn't exist, that's all well and good. Putin thinks it exists. Like, Putin has no question, right? He's like, oh no, this is working for us, right? Because, like, the ice caps are melting, Siberia's melting. We're just going to have more arable land. So you sort of start seeing these different countries reacting to what's happening in the environment. Droughts, dry land, no more water in China. And they're reacting to it now, I think, at a much faster pace. So, like, breakneck speed is how they're gumming and grabbing the land and the water and arable land, because I think the world's changing, and they're seeing it happen. So I think now it is probably just that much more of a kind of crisis situation for these countries. And so we're seeing it, I think, laid bare more than before.
Yeah. Do you think, I don't know that if you talked about this, I don't think you talked about this in the film, but one thing that I feel like that we do have that's like kind of eases my mind a little bit about this whole thing, because it is scary to think of these countries coming in and taking up all the food and water resources. But don't we have the eminent domain thing that the government can just take your land for any reason? So if for some reason, like, we were starting to lose food and water, the government could just come in and say, hey, we're taking this, right?
That's interesting. I mean, I think, right, like, the government would have to make the I think the case that this is for survival, right? That this is actually for the good of the people. I think that's eminent domain falls under that, like the better of democracy, the good for the people. So I guess it could make that argument, but, like, the government would be going straight up against business, and, like, big business. I mean, we're talking, like, food and water. Are you kidding? Like, look what oil has done, like, wreaked havoc across the world just for oil. Like, wars have been fought over that, resource. Imagine what food and water would be, you know? So it's such enormous business. And I think we don't historically have an awesome track record, our government, of going up against, corporations if they're potentially, like, greasing the wheels. I mean, right now I'm totally out of my, out of my
That's
league
true.
with
No,
this,
that's a
but I'm
good,
sort of like,
no, that's a very good point. You're right. I mean,
right,
we have the government, but I mean, even I had the guy on from who worked under multiple administrations of different parties, and he worked with the FDA and stuff, and he even said, like, we're not doing a good job of with the FDA stuff, and it's because I think these companies are kind of more running things, and they're just kind of reacting to they're approving all these things that probably should have a little bit more scrutiny into our food system and stuff. And I mean, so you're right, the
right.
corporations are definitely have more power. I feel like that's a good point.
I think that's right. And I think when we start distrusting kind of things, like, we don't trust that an aquifer is actually running out, right? Because you don't really know, right? I mean, I don't know, like, I don't know this stuff. I have to
I
trust,
wouldn't.
right? I have to trust sort of scientists. I have to trust, whatever reports that are coming out from people you entrust with these kinds of facts. And so, like, I think you could just make the argument that, like, a lot of folks, maybe in Phoenix or whatever, until Nate broke the story and basically said, do you really realize what's happening? Like, they're fossil aquifers, is I think what he calls them, and what they're supposedly called, which means when that water is gone, it's gone. Like, that doesn't get replenished. And so really having to kind of, like, make sure people trust that information, right? And say, like, oh
Right.
my gosh, okay, this isn't good for us. And then make sure, like, Phoenix trusts that information, and, like, that they've put it in place that they could cancel that lease, and turn it around should they see it not working out. And also, this is a county where these, we found this farmer and these landowners and stuff, where we found this stuff happening. It's not wealthy, right? There's not mansions there and, like, golf courses there. And so there's not like political power, maybe there's not as big of a voice there. And so you could just sort of like not take that whole area and that county all that seriously, when they're not that represented, people aren't listening to them. So like there's that too. These grabs tend to happen where people don't necessarily have like a big enough voice in their state, in their city. So it's yeah, it's even trickier as a result.
That's why a film like this is so important for everyone to see.
Yeah, it's I mean, that's why like having investigation, investigative reporters, right, who like have no skin in the game, right? Nate's not from Phoenix, he's not from, he's just literally, he just happened to do this Smithfield food store, and he's like, wait a second, like, why is there a scramble? Like, why are they all scrambling for food and water in these places? Like, what's actually happening? And could this actually be happening in right underneath our noses? It's definitely happening in Africa. People talk about that, right? China's in Africa, Middle East is in Africa, but like, could it be happening in our backyards? And I think he realized that like, they're coming for the Western United States.
Yeah, it's scary what's happening in Africa. I had this climatologist on. She was talking about green colonialism. I'd never heard that term before, but basically it's like how they're not allowing them to build power plants and things in Africa, and not allowing them to have electricity. And I mean, that kind of, it's just, I don't know. I think there's a lot of things that go on over there that we just have no clue about. It's really sad.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's crazy. So we had a whole story we reported out that ended up on the edit room floor, which is just such a bummer because it's such an important story. But so Ethiopia and Egypt, like Ethiopia is building the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, which is essentially a huge dam that's going to dam the Nile. And they're like, they need it for their hydroelectric power. Like, as one of our experts in the film says, like Ethiopia runs up against famine like every 5 years or so. Like, they need energy, they need the power. And so they're damming the Nile, and well, downstream from the Nile is Egypt. And Egypt's like, you can't build this dam, like, and leave us with, the trickle of water or whatever. You can't do this. This is going to hurt our agriculture. And Ethiopia is like, but that's like our water. Like, like everybody else is moving into the 21st century. Like we are not. We need to be able to capture this power.
Yeah.
And Egypt's like, but you can't do that to us. And if you do it, we might have to take out that dam, which is like a declaration of war, right? And Ethiopia,
Right.
well, guess what? We haven't lost a war yet. So like these two countries, nobody like knows this, right? This is like not being reported out in big mainstream media, but like these two countries are like, it's brinksmanship. And this is like a part of the world where like we cannot afford to have a war. Like, we have a good relationship historically, a tie with Egypt in that zone, in that area. China does with Ethiopia. UAE does with Ethiopia and with Egypt. Like there are big powers backing these places and who have affiliations and friendships with these places. And like those big powers cannot come up against each other. Like it's World War III. So there's so much to talk about when we talk about like my water, your water. Like we've got to figure this out because we're so interdependent. We're all connected, with this one resource. It's like the universal human story. And so we kind of got to figure out how to get this right.
Yeah. And I think you said something at the end of the film, like there is enough resources. It's just the distribution. Cause if people are going to come in and do these grabs, like they're hogging stuff basically is that kind of how it's like you're taking too much.
That's right. You're taking too much. And a lot of it is you're taking too much to eat in a certain way. And to eat in that certain way is becoming not sustainable across the globe. Not everybody can eat that way, right?
Well, isn't part of it a lot of the shipping? Because I can't remember, I don't think it was your film. Somewhere I heard them talking about like shrimp and stuff and seafood, for instance. We buy a lot of ours from Asia and ship it to America because it's cheaper. And then we take the good stuff from America that's a high quality and we ship it to Asia. This makes no sense to me. It's because Americans want cheap, and in Asia they want the high quality.
It's interesting. Well, it's so funny. And we are, so basically one of the things we learned too, it's not just what we eat, it's waste, right? And just like so much waste happens even before it gets into our homes. So like the production that you're just talking about, production, distribution,
Yeah.
like the shipping going back and forth, just, and how much stuff one side throws away,
Yeah.
or deems to be not, delicious. And,
Like, why are we shipping? Why are we getting fruit from other like in South America and stuff and ship? I mean, just the cost of that, it doesn't make sense to me. Wouldn't it cost more to ship that than?
We'll see in this exactly. Well, and just thinking about it through that way, like I never really understood, like, I just didn't understand the intricacies of like eat locally, like, right.
Yes.
Like, stuff is right. Like I never quite, I knew that it was good. Like I know, like I should do that. I should go to the farmer's market here and just buy what they have, but I never understood why until I realized like, oh my gosh, we are like making another country like suck up their own water to grow like a piece of produce or like to grow something that like a watermelon, so we can have a watermelon in December. Like what is that? Like we didn't have that growing up. Like there was food in season and then food of out of season, but like we weren't doing this crazy stuff because we needed to have everything when we want it, how much we want it, and then throw away a third of it because that's another thing we do, right? We thought, oh, there's an expiration date. That's out, like, and so it just, but we're just taking this toll on like, think about how much what that's doing to that country.
Yeah.
To be like digging up their own water to do that stuff. And then like the distribution, the production, like the, getting it over here, the transportation, all of that is so just incredibly wasteful for us to have something that's completely out of season. So that part made sense. I also started understanding like, okay, then we have this place, right? The place like a Zambia, right? Or like you're saying this, South America, like these places use up their water, use up their resources, and then they fall into like maybe their own famine, right? That's food that they should be eating. A lot of them are not, are actually struggling to have enough nutrition. So then they're falling into conflict, let's say. They fall into, famine or some level of famine. Well, famine breeds disease. Disease goes everywhere on the planet, right? That's like, as we've seen, doesn't really respect borders. And then there's also refugees, right? They, come over and we have, all sorts of problems with that when it happens, but like, okay, there's causes for that. And then there's like falling into conflict, which is conflict that we might have to get involved in because these are all places that are going to feed the world. So we don't want them to be at war. And so like, I mean, it's just like and then the prices. I mean, you look at like, go to your grocery store, like look what happened with the Ukraine, like there was just a ton of stuff went up, and we became really expensive. Food did, stuff wasn't on the shelves. I mean, we are so interconnected that like the little that we do at home to be able to kind of like correct and redirect like our little part of it can have big effects. But again, all this stuff, started making sense to me through the investigation.
Yeah, I think it's all tied into. Again, I'd recommend watching for people to watch and for yourself, I guess, if you haven't seen Food Inc. and Food Inc. 2. And I think they talk about how like, it used to be, a lot of think our food came from small farms, and now it's like, I can't remember the percentage. Maybe it's at least 70 or 80% of the food in America comes from like 5 or 6 companies or something, which is like really scary. And I think you saw this in the pandemic when if there's one like hang up and a shutdown and a plant needs to shut down, I mean, that screws up the entire system. And remember, like people couldn't get baby food or whatever. And you're like, what? Why can't we get baby food? It's because there's like one plant had a problem. And then that's like a majority of where it came from.
That's right. I mean, and that's another thing so our country, again, they're really, when we're talking about Saudi Arabia, we're talking about China, they've moved into the 21st century in the way that they look at water and they look at like what they're going to need to get to be able to feed their country. We're still in the 19th century, right? Like our laws date all the way, a lot of our laws date all the way back to that. So it's sort of like, we are not viewing like food as a system. Like there's just one company and this company knows what it's doing, but it has no idea. Like it's not in complete close contact with what other food systems are doing across the nation. So it's sort of like the way it was explained by some of our experts is that like we need to change the food system. Like we're just so businessy with our food and water instead of viewing it as this thing that might go away, this thing that we have to take care of and be sustainable with. We view it as business. And so there's just like even the way we farm, right? It's like soybeans, and then the soil is destroyed, right? And then you move to another plot and then you just, right? So like, that's why regenerative farming has been this helpful thing in the conversation is like, you have to like do different crops to be able to, and cover crops to be able to like take care of your soil. So there's just a ton of examples like that of how we've gotten it wrong.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the research I've done too. It seems like the regenerative farming and just having small farms that, with like the soil, like the cow poops and then that like grows the soil, like, it all works. But when you've got these weird factories and all these chickens on top of each other in the dark, crapping on each other, I mean, that just also breeds like disease and all this. I think that's why you're seeing with the bird flu and stuff. I feel like that, and I mean, I'm surprised we haven't gotten more diseases from all this stuff. I mean, if you see the inside of where like these chickens are being raised and stuff, I mean, it's like a horror movie. It's scary.
It's totally like that. It's totally like that. And it's just like there's the inhumane side of it, which is just like that's, obviously like
Right.
that Blackfish to me. And that was, something I care about. But like it's also just totally, it's the disease. There's just so many arguments now of like why we should be doing it differently that it's just like the clock is ticking sometimes. You're just like, why can't we all just kind of like all agree?
Yes. Yes. Don't make this a political thing. I don't care what's like, we should all agree that food and water is important.
No, like we're just, that's it. That's it. And it's just like, look at, like, we're in like a very Trump voting center of like, this is where the Arizona stuff was happening, where when we went in to make the documentary, we're in there and we know that is who they're voting for. And I feel like they had more in common with the villagers in Serenge, Zambia than they did with, like any other political affiliations or parties. I was just like, no, this is about power. It's not red state. It's not blue state. And like the inequities that happen with water, they target vulnerable communities in both blue states and red states equally. Like they're going to feel it. Like Flint, Michigan's going to feel it, right? Like with bad water, like the farmers in Arizona are going to feel it with getting aquifers drained. Like, it's just like, it's going to come, it comes for everybody kind of equitably. So hoping against hope that we can depoliticize this and make it like, this is again, I call it the shared human story.
Yeah. Well, what about, I don't think you talked about this in the film, but this is kind of making the rounds in the news stuff with all the farmland that China is buying. So much of it is next to military bases. What's the strategy there? Did you dig into that at all?
It's really interesting. It's a question for Nate to see if he knows, but I did not know that. I did not know that. Yeah, so I couldn't really opine about that, but that sounds like
yeah, I'll have to show you the map. It's pretty crazy. And then the other thing I noticed in the film, like right when the film started, I was like, you have the, can I say who it was? The antagonist. I could say that.
Oh yeah, you can. Yeah.
Eric Prince. So he's like, and he's kind of part of this guy that's doing these deals and securing the lands for other people's other countries. But what you didn't, I kept waiting. I was like, oh, she's going to bring this up. Don't worry. And then it never came up. I was like, wait, what? You didn't talk about Bill Gates? Isn't Bill Gates buying up all this farmland? Isn't that part of the story too?
I think so. He is. And we did reach out multiple times to get information. Yeah, we're not able to, interview him, but getting really the skinny on what he's doing and why he's doing it and like all that, it was just too difficult without having access to him and what, is going on. But yeah, he is, I think my understanding is like the biggest agricultural landowner in the nation. So I don't know why, and I don't know what is going on there, but it's something we were interested in for sure.
It's concerning, to say the least. Yeah, I would say. Yeah, it's very. But yeah, this other guy. I mean, I don't know. I think some of these people are they just look at it like a business deal. They're not thinking like, oh, is this good for the planet? Is this good for the American people? Is this good for the people of this other country? They're just like, hey, I can make this much money by selling this thing, and it's legal. I'm not breaking any laws.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, I'll make the money.
that's it. That's it. And it was really weird. Like I kept thinking, that I'm going to see, I don't know. We felt like at some point you're going to see this, like, okay, this is better for humanity, like this is better for Africa. If we come in and we make these deals, then maybe we can also feed Africa. We can take their land and pump their water and all that stuff, and we can own it, but we're also going to take care of Africa. Like, you kept thinking that it was going to just turn a corner, even if it was just because, like, Eric Prince wants to tell himself a narrative that, like, lets him sleep at night. And that, like, and to know that it was just like, I never saw that narrative really, and in fact, one of his people he's worked with said the opposite, said, if you see an African dying in the street, leave him. That's Darwin at his best. It was just like, it was so shocking how brazen it is. Usually when those things are happening, you feel like they're telling themselves a story, that they're in some way, shape, or form doing something good. And I couldn't believe kind of the lack of how little they valued human life, in these regions. So, pretty shocking.
Yeah, it's so sad. How does that work? Because like you got an access to like all these emails. Is there like, and you say that you've run this thing through the lawyer, so you didn't break any laws with that or whatever, or there's nothing. I mean, could he sue you, or are you worried about that?
I mean, I guess anyone can bring a case forward, or what, I will say that it was like crazy disciplined the way that thing was treated, the Trove, which is 20,000 emails basically. Like, it was only all that was used was what was completely germane to the grab and to really what we were looking at the time. There, it was really trying to, essentially it was corroborating the stuff that we were already looking into and that we were trying to find. And it was just like, oh yes, okay, this is happening. And these folks are going to go in there. A lot of them are going to be strong men and essentially security guards, because hungry people rise up and hungry people get upset and say, you can't take our food, we're starving. And that the idea that there are people put in place there to tamp down that hungry people is like, okay, well, now we know. Now we know the truth. It's actually, everybody's expecting it, and they're putting an operation in place to make sure they can take out uprisings.
Yeah, and didn't you guys, like, when you were doing the story, you had some trouble at the airport, and they told you that you couldn't get on the plane or something like that?
Totally. We were in Lusaka, Zambia, trying to get in to report on what's happening in the villages there. And someone knows that what we're doing. Someone really high up knew what we were doing. And so suddenly we land in Zambia and our names are on a list. And they said, wait a second. And they detained us. And while they were detaining us, we looked behind us, and there was actually a list of all our names and our passport numbers, like, on the bulletin board behind us. So they were waiting for us. Like, they knew we were coming and they weren't going to let us in the country. And so anytime someone is not going to let you report on something, you really wonder, what are you hiding? I mean, it's just sort of like, it made it so much more clear that something's going down, that they don't want people to see.
Yeah.
So we still don't know who stopped us. We just still don't know who it was, but it had to be very high up.
Yeah, that's what makes the film so important for people to see and get the word out. Because then, if we all know, then it's like then you've done your job, and that's why you're doing such good work with these films. I love it. Do you have a future movie that I don't think I saw anything that's in the works. Are you looking for an idea right now?
Nothing in the works right now. Just doing, some development stuff. Nothing really um super concrete yet, but like hopefully something soon. But yeah, nothing on the deck.
Like, would you want to do another? I know you've done some just regular films with scripts and stuff with acting. Like you've done that, and then you've done these documentaries. Do you think the next one would be either or are you leaning a certain way?
Either or, like if the story's there, for the documentary, I jump in with both feet. I think, or if there's a script that I'm attached to some things, but nothing's going really fast. But I just um we'll see. Like, The Grab took us 7 years to make. Like we've been making
Wow.
it for 7 years. I still can't believe that. Nature have been reporting the whole time. I mean, it takes that long to dig up that much. And so, sometimes I think like, okay, bring me some puppies and chocolate. I'll just do that documentary, just like sleep at night. Don't worry about being sued. But um, but I'm sure I'll be, whatever, back in trouble pretty soon. Just how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things in the world. I mean, especially for me, like here in Arizona, like I know like the Native American reservations, the homelessness, the fentanyl, like just so many people are struggling. I don't know if there's one specific thing within that you could focus on, but gosh, I would love to see your take on, especially the homeless thing. It just seems like it's just blown up
I know.
recently, and people blame this or blame that or this politician or that. I mean, I feel like there's a deeper issue behind all that, why people are struggling. And I don't know, it's just sad to see. I would love to have somebody, I feel like it's going to be somebody like you that's going to solve it, not a politician personally, but
That's amazing to hear you say that. I love your faith. I wish I had that much faith in myself or in, how the machinations of how the world works. But I agree with you. I see the same thing. I'm in Los Angeles and I'm just like, it's like so confusing and heartbreaking and then scary and like, just it is all those things and it's worse than it's ever been. And we just like don't seem to be taking care of each other. And I don't know, it's just sort of like, there's just like so much destitution and so much like depravity. And you're like, how do we take care of each other? Like, have we forgotten that that's not like, it's not even political, it's just like, I don't want to, you don't want suffering. And like, yeah, I think it's from what I understand, one of the hardest things to crack, like healthcare and the homeless problem. Like I hear like they're like so and of course water, right?
Mhm.
It's like
I think
they're,
it's all related. And I know you're saying meat is bad, and probably I don't know. I've heard different things on that with the climate and stuff, but I know like in just terms of nutrition, like I have all these guys on my show that I mean I'm not they're like full on carnivore, which I think is a little bit extreme, but there's something to be said. I mean, I think more just eating real foods, whether it's fruits, vegetables, meats, nuts, those things rather than the processed food. I'm really anti-processed food. I feel like that is causing a lot of health issues, and then I think it affects mental health, and it's just a whole rabbit hole that I've been going down lately.
I think that's true. I think processed foods for sure is it that it just can't be good. I think the science bears out that it's not good. And I think also it's just sort of like, you know, like I would love to support the local, farmer, like
Yeah.
the factory farms and like what they're doing. Like you see all these cows when we drive up on the five, and you're like, you've got to be kidding me. Like this is just like, how are we doing this? Like what's going on? And like that can't be right. And like I think there's just like a happy, sustainable way and humane way that we could be treating kind of everything. I think that like, yeah, I don't know that like uh, I don't, again, I'm not a nutritional expert or anything like that, but it's just like, it's so clear that you can't eat as much beef as we tend to eat, like just your arteries.
Especially, yeah, the way we're raising it where they're all stacked on top of each other. But I think you can have sustainable small farms where you could, I mean, it's just like we've gotten rid of all these small farms. It's just like I don't know if we can get those back somehow, or
I
I
mean,
feel
we
like
have to, like, we don't have a choice. Like they use less water. They like, meat used to be like like you didn't have like a steak, you know, you couldn't have that every night, right? When you were little, like it was just like you went and you ate like that every once in a while. Like it's like this is a reward. This is like a thing that you're doing that like, you know, is you know, expensive and it's rare. Like the idea that it's just so cheap and so accessible speaks to the fact that it's gone away from the family, you know, from the family farm and like from the like local, and it's turned into another corporation. And like that's why we're eating it, you know, in the way that we are, because it's cheaper. And then that's what's you know, sensibly making us sick, sucking up all our water. Like all these things are coming from this one thing. So yeah, there's ways we can come together on this issue. You know?
I hope so. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for doing this. The grab is out now. I mean, people can go, I think it's in some theaters, but I think I paid on Amazon. I just paid like $5 or $7 and rented it. You can rent it now.
That's exactly right. And in fact, yes, it's everywhere you rent online. So wherever you rent online, so it's Apple and iTunes and Google and Amazon. But it's also extended in Arizona. So in a couple of the theaters out there, it's extended for another week. And so it's going on a 3-week run, which is really rare for a documentary. So if you tell your listeners to go see it in a theater, you know, even better.
Yes. Awesome. And then maybe, would it be up for an Oscar this year? Would it be this year's Oscars, right?
No. I don't know anything.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Did you submit it last year, Gabriela? Sorry, Rebecca from Magnolia butting in here.
I think it would be next year though, because I think if it just came out, right?
No, it's this year, hon. I mean, if you didn't submit it last year, and you would have qualified because you were at some film festivals, but you qualified this year because you're in theaters this year in 2024. So
but didn't the shortlist already come out and everything? Like,
no, you're thinking Emmys.
Oh, yeah, I don't really know. Yeah, see,
it would have been at the end of December, and then they air the show in March or April. So yeah.
Yeah, we didn't. Magnolia is submitting it for this year's Oscars.
Perfect.
Oh, I thought it was, we didn't do our qualifying run in close. I don't know. This is all insider.
No, well, Magnolia Pictures released it in theaters. Oh, I mean, the only caveat to that is if you're right, if we did a full run, which I believe we did.
Okay.
Did it now, yeah. So I think it would be next year. But again,
we have to go through all the rules. But
Rebecca's smarter about this stuff. So like, I don't. Clearly, I'm just like, woohoo, we're out! Yay, we're in theaters.
All right.
It's online.
All right. It's a great flick, and I look forward to your next project. You'll have to come back on the show when you're promoting that.
Of course, yeah. Okay. So happy to be on. So nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thanks so much.
All right.
Take care.
Of you. Bye. Bye, Rebecca.